Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are on this planet. My name is Chase Jarvis, founder and CEO of CreativeLive. I am so excited for today's live event with a dear, dear friend of mine, Mr. Chris Guillebeau. We're coming at you live from remote locations amidst these crazy times, but we are going to really dive into Chris's new book and a handful of other things. If you're new to this channel or to Chris, I would love to tell you a little bit about him. Chris, in addition to being a dear friend and one of the first 100 teachers on CreativeLive, Chris is a writer of numerous guides of travel and small business, otherwise living a non-conventional life, which we respect and admire a lot here at CreativeLive. He's a world-class speaker where he talks about many of these same topics all over the stages across the globe. He's the holder of numerous world records, some of which I've had the good fortune of participating in with him, including being the youngest person ever to travel to all 193 countries around the world. He is, last but not least, a renowned best-selling author of numerous books, including The $100 Startup, The Art of Nonconformity, Happiness of Pursuit, 100 Side Hustles, Born for This, and his newest book, which we're here to talk about today, The Money Tree. And in today's event, we're going to basically follow the structure of a 3-act play. The first act is going to be Chris giving us an amazing keynote presentation covering so many topics of the book and things that he's been thinking about during these interesting times, the role that money and the opportunities that are available to us play in our lives. The second act, Chris and I are going to be in conversation, entertaining a lot of these topics. And then in the third act, we're going to be taking your questions live from everywhere around the planet. And the way that you can participate in those questions is depending on where you're watching this. If you're on Chris's class page here at CreativeLive, or if you're watching at creativelive.com/TV, you can go up in the upper right-hand corner and click the chat button, and that'll open up a window, and you can ask your questions there. Myself and a couple of our team here at CreativeLive are monitoring that. And of course, if you're watching via Facebook or YouTube Live, you can just chat some questions there in the comments, and I will get those. Of course, we're not going to be able to get to all the questions, but please don't hesitate at all to ask those questions. We're going to get to as many as we can in that third act of the 3-act play. So now the moment you've been waiting for, a global book tour debut here on the internet. It gives me huge pleasure to introduce a dear friend and your guide today, and in lots of other ways, a guide to many of us across our lives, Mr. Chris Guillebeau. Take it away, Chris.
Chase, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chase Jarvis, CreativeLive. Hello, Internet. I'm so happy to be here. So excited to have the chance to come on one of my favorite platforms with my favorite people and talk about the money tree, but also talk about some broader concepts that I think are very, very relevant to this time that we're all in. You know, I think when we look ahead, we go ahead 6 months from now, a year from now, multiple years from now, whatever the time frame is, we're all going to be able to look back and remember this time. Like, it's not going to be something that we forget, right, for all kinds of reasons. And something that I've been thinking about for myself is, what do I want to remember during this time? Because some of those things are already kind of set, right? That's just based on history, on current events, and so on. But I want to be able to look back and say, okay, well, all these things were happening, and in lots of ways it was really crazy, but I did something during this time. I made something. I'm able to look back and say, like, I had a goal, or I made a change or a shift in my life. And I think actually a lot of people are going to make tremendous shifts during this time. So that's my encouragement to you just as we start here. As we look ahead, how do we want to see this time in history when we're looking back on it later? So I'm here, as Chase said, to do the virtual book launch of my book, The Money Tree. I was supposed to go to 40 cities. I was going to do a book tour all across North America and then eventually beyond. But now I'm going to 0 cities. So, of course, I've had to change and make adjustments along with everybody else. But I'm very grateful for the chance to speak to people all over the world here. So we'll talk a little bit about the book, but I just want to kind of acknowledge reality and kind of focus, even more on this concept of, first the reality, we're in this world that has been turned upside down. A lot of people are anxious, rightfully so. A lot of people are concerned and worried. A lot of the things that we have believed to be true, perhaps we're realizing are not true. A lot of expectations we've had, a lot of assumptions we've had. There's just so many changes, right? So many disruptions. And the interesting thing is we've never experienced anything like this before. in human history, but we're going through it together now. So whatever like global events have happened before, we didn't have the connectivity that we do now. So now everybody's doing all kinds of online meetings. We're all watching CreativeLive and connecting with people in different places without being able to connect physically. So it's kind of interesting because just as an analogy, I'm here in this studio and Chase is in another studio. So I'm in a room, with some cameras, but it's kind of isolating because nobody else is here. But at the same time, I know that a lot of people are here in a way, because I know that you're watching from wherever you are, in your couch, your office, on the go perhaps. So this is kind of like what life is like now in lots of ways. Like we're isolated, but we're also together. What do we do? What do you do? What do I do when everything around you changes? Like when you realize that these things that you have believed in, or these things that you have relied upon, perhaps, are not true now, or just something that you can't rely on. Or, as I said, so much has changed. So I really believe, and this is something I've been focusing on a lot, we'll talk about it here today, uncertainty and opportunity often come together. Like whenever there's progress, there are some negative effects. Whenever there is disruption, there are some positive effects. So the question is where is the opportunity? How can we find that? And one thing I really know is that a lot of things are outside of our control. In fact, so many things are outside of our control. I don't have to tell you that, right? But if we focus on what we can influence, then I think that is the key to being able to look back on this time and say, I did everything I could to be safe, to take care of myself, to check up on people that I loved. Maybe I kind of reoriented a bit in that way. But, as I said earlier, I also did something for myself. I made a change. And I found that opportunity for myself, one perhaps, that I wouldn't have found otherwise. So that's my goal to talk with you about here today. I very much look forward to the interactive portion, as Chase mentioned. So our agenda for this presentation, this part of it, I'm going to talk about the student loan crisis, something that was scary before all of this current situation began to occur. And I think it's very relevant now, even if you don't have student loans, if you don't have student debt. I think it's relevant to a lot of people. I'm going to talk about a new model of earning extra income, so that if you're facing financial pressure of any kind, you can learn a new way of doing that. Essentially, I'm going to talk about the first way, the second way, and importantly, the third way. And then as part of that, I'm going to give you 14 pretty quick examples of real projects. Okay, so people that are using this model. And if you have listened to Side Hustle School or followed some of my other work, some of these stories might be familiar to you. You might hear an update or a bit of a refresh on them. So let's dive in. Let's talk about something scary that isn't what everybody else is talking about 99% of the time. So when I first started working on this book, I was thinking a bit about this problem of how every spring and summer, more than 2 million students just in the US alone will graduate with a 4-year diploma. It's actually 4 million students graduating, including associate degrees and such. Obviously, people elsewhere graduating around the world. And especially in North America, 70% of them will have significant student loan debt. 70% of them have debt of more than $10,000. The average is something like $30,000. And of course, a lot of people have much more than that. Now, historically, there's been this bargain where we go to school, we choose to invest, maybe take on debt, we spend a certain amount of time, years, et cetera. But in the end, we're going to get a high-paying job. We're going to enter, a career in which we will have job security and so on. Well, we all know that's really not the case for so many people these days. And the cost of education has outpaced inflation while providing lower returns, which has created a generational wealth gap, so that millennials are now much poorer off than preceding generations. This is either the first time in history this has happened, or it's certainly the first time in a very long time. So those are just a few statistics. I don't need to tell you any more about that because you already know what a problem is. And just in case you forgot, because I know you didn't, all of this is taking place in an uncertain time. Okay, so we have all these things going on. And if you don't have that problem of student debt, if you don't know somebody that does, which you probably do, then any kind of financial pressure, if you have lost your job, if you are underemployed now, like so many people are, or even if you still have a good job, but you're a little bit worried and afraid, rightfully so, then you are facing that kind of situation of insecurity, of uncertainty, of okay, what do I do? What can I do about this? So that's what we're going to talk about here, solutions, practical responses. And speaking of responses, I want to show you a couple of ways that we tend to respond to this problem. When we're feeling financial pressure, there's a couple ways that we tend to respond. One of those ways is we get mad. Okay, we get really mad, and the object of our wrath tends to vary. It might be we're upset at another generation. Like, why did you leave us in this place? We're mad at the government. We're mad at corporate America. It could be a political system. We're upset with capitalism. We're upset with socialism, something in between. Whatever it is, we get really mad. So here's the thing. It's not that there is nothing in the world to be upset about. It's not that any of these parties are innocent. It's not that there's not a place for righteous anger. The problem is that after you're mad, you're still in the same situation you were before. Like, your fundamental situation isn't changed. So getting mad actually doesn't solve the problem. The other thing that we tend to do when we're in this state of anxiety or even panic or desperation for some people, we embrace extreme frugality. And we're like, I can't spend any money at all. I need to stop buying my coffee. And if I deposit that $4 I was going to spend on my coffee, then 10 years from now I'll be able to buy a coffee maker, and I can make my coffee at home, and then I can deposit another $4 in 40 years if I don't get hit by a bus. Maybe that will contribute to some retirement. Again, some point in the distant future, right? So that's not really going to solve the immediate problem. That's not really going to help you be better off. Maybe eventually one day, but very, very far in the future. So I believe those are the responses that we tend to gravitate towards. But if you have this problem, whether it is student loan debt, whether it's another kind of debt, whether it is unemployment, underemployment, the lack of job security, just feeling that your choices are limited because of finances, this is the only real solution. This is what you need to do. You need to actually increase your income. Not just, cut back on the coffee, not just get mad. You need to increase your income, and it's a two-part process because you want to increase your income and decrease your dependency. At this point, you're realizing maybe some of the things that we've depended on before are not actually that reliable. Job security is really not a thing. So how can I lessen my dependence on external parties? How can I create more security for myself? And I've been talking a bit about money. The new book is called The Money Tree, right? And I've been thinking a lot about it because I'm the first to say that money is a tool, right? Money is a resource. Money is it's not about pursuing money for the sake of money. It's just about what you can exchange, that money for, and so on. Ultimately, we're all interested in life purpose and life meaning. How can we, live a fulfilling life? How can we contribute, to other people's lives? How can we be of service and such? But at the same time, this whole thing about why are you focusing on money? The people who tend to say things like, well, money doesn't matter or money isn't important, those people tend to have money. Do you know what I mean? Those people actually tend to have enough. And I have never heard, in all the emails I get and communication I get, I have never heard someone write in and say, I just lost my job. Please stop talking about making money. So I want you to understand, if you're in a situation where you are okay right now, then that's great, but millions of people are not. And so when you're in debt, this is the key point, many of your choices are made for you. You have these limitations, you have these constraints. All of us now are experiencing all sorts of limitations and constraints on our ability to live daily life, our ability to travel, how we interact with people and such. Well, if you are in this situation of crippling debt or some other financial pressure, that is your situation all the time. Right? You always have these limitations and constraints, not the same ones necessarily, but you're always living in this world in which you have something imposed upon you. And so it is crippling, as I said. Money's not everything, but if you don't have it, your life is very different. So if you accept this principle, if you're like, okay, can't just, get mad, can't just save money, how do I actually do that? How do I increase my income? And here, once again, we have a couple of responses that we tend to gravitate toward, right? Because this is what we're told to do, and this is what we see other people trying to do. And one of those things is we're just going to work harder, right? We're either going to work harder in our job or try to get a different job, and just try to do a better job and get ahead somehow. Nothing wrong with working harder, but if you have $50,000 worth of debt, that's not necessarily going to help. The other thing, which has been marketed to us very well by large corporations, is go and join the gig economy. Okay, go and join the gig economy, which really is just a set of glorified part-time jobs. It's a set of opportunities to go and make small amounts of money, and there is some benefit, to being able to set your own schedule and to have, some amount of choice there. But there's also a great deal of limitations, right? And if entrepreneurship is about freedom, or being able to be free of financial pressure is about freedom, what kind of freedom is it if someone else makes all the decisions? Because with all of these platforms, all these opportunities in the gig economy, you think you have some choice, but there are a tremendous amount of limitations. These companies control the amount of competition in your area. They control your compensation effectively. If they don't like you, then they kick you off the platform. So again, what kind of freedom is it if somebody else is deciding everything? Nothing at all wrong with having a part-time job. Just to be clear, like in our lives, most of us have done things like deliver pizza, or like I did that when I was young. I worked in a warehouse, like putting boxes on a truck. But that's not what we want to do for the rest of our lives. And if you really want to get ahead, if you are experiencing that pressure, you have to do something different. So those are the solutions that other people propose. Those are what we tend to gravitate towards. I want to propose something different. And Chase was very kind to say some nice things about me in the beginning. I'll just say a couple things. I've spent my entire life, for better or worse, questioning authority, looking for alternative solutions, and I have always worked for myself. This is the definition, I'll let you read this, of entrepreneur that I have always kind of gravitated toward myself. Someone who will work 24 hours a day for themselves to avoid working 1 hour a day for someone else. I'm not saying this is the model everyone should follow. To be clear, a lot of people that I featured on my podcast or in my books, a lot of my community, have regular jobs. They have families and responsibilities. They have this thing called life-work balance, et cetera. So I'm not trying to say that everybody else needs to, work all the time or whatever. But for me, I've just been very motivated, to start different projects and to explore, as I said, different solutions and alternatives. And my overall mission is to help people make their own choices and become self-reliant. And I've done that for 11 years now with this project I have called The Art of Nonconformity, which my overall mission is, or life statement, I would say, is you don't have to live your life the way others expect. There are all kinds of expectations that people will put on you. There are all kinds of assumptions. There are all kinds of traditional paths that are laid out for you to follow. And you don't have to adhere to those expectations or assumptions or follow those paths. There could be something else better for you. It doesn't mean that everyone is lying to you about everything. It doesn't mean this is not like the Matrix, everything you've heard is untrue. But a lot of what you have heard may not be true for you. And that's the whole point. Or it may not be true for you at this time in your life, at this season in history. Another thing I really believe is that nobody will care about your well-being as much as you do. So even though there are good jobs, there are good companies, it's not like I completely mistrust, every organization or large structure. Nobody's going to care about you getting ahead, you having more security the way that you do, or the way that you need to. So what I want to talk about here is the solution called the third way. And this is the model that I've developed in this new book, The Money Tree, a story about finding the fortune in your own backyard. And this book is essentially telling the story of a young guy named Jake who has a pretty good job, a decent job at least, and he is a hard worker, but he's really struggling, like so many people. And he had a lot of student loan debt, and this debt is affecting every part of his life. It's affecting his relationship. It's affecting his day job performance. He's getting evicted from his apartment. All this kind of stuff is happening. And what happens in life sometimes is all the pressures arrive at once, right? It's like you have one thing and you're like, I'm dealing with this, and then something else, comes along, and it's like this piling on effect. And so he's trying to figure out, what can I do? How can I get out of this situation? And he, first tries, to just work harder, and he considers, becoming a rideshare driver, but realizes, that's not actually going to solve the problem effectively. So, he ends up going to a group where everybody's in this situation or similar situation of trying to create something for themselves, and they're all trying to do it without spending a lot of money or taking a lot of risk, which I'll come back to. So I mentioned the third way. What's the first way and the second way? The first way of starting a business, if you go back, traditionally, when I was young, I thought about, really young, as a kid, I thought about one day I want to own a business, and I was always thinking about it's going to be like a retail store. Or I don't know if I was thinking about a coffee shop then, but this is like the classical model, mom and pop store, right? You're going to open the dry cleaner or whatever. And that requires capital, one way or another. You usually have to borrow money, whether it's from the bank or from your parents or from your own savings, some other source. It involves risk, like it might work out, but it might not. And if it fails, there are pretty significant consequences. And there's also a long time frame to it, for all these kinds of businesses. Like it's going to take a while before you know if it's working or not. And you could end up spending years on a project that ultimately fails. The second way is the way of the startup world. So this is like, every company in San Francisco or Tel Aviv or Berlin or wherever making an app, or doing something that also requires capital. It also involves risk. Lots of things can go wrong. And to obtain that capital, you usually need to have connections, which is another asset, essentially. You need to have the right connections, the right relationships. You need to know people. And so these two models are often presented as opposites, like, oh, you got your retail store, and this is the new way of the startup world. But think about this. What do these approaches have in common? And there's an obvious answer. Both of them are dependent on other people. Both of them are dependent on somebody else, some other person or party, to come along and kind of bestow permission in the form of funding, usually. But it's dependent on some other circumstance, which if you think about, is really another way of saying both of them are dependent on something outside your control. And when I started a few minutes ago, I was like, right now there's a lot of stuff outside of our control. What is within our control? Don't we want to maximize what is within our control so that we're not dependent on external events? Or we're less dependent, let's say. We're less dependent on external events. We're less dependent on externalities, for our security. So first way, second way, and I'm proposing the solution is the third way. The third way is about real people. It's about people like Jake in the book. It's about maybe like somebody watching right now who has found a way to, they didn't always identify as like a capital E entrepreneur, but they found a way to start a little project that makes money. And this project makes money. It becomes an asset for them. They do so without, going into debt, spending a ton of money. This whole thing about how you have to spend money to make money, I don't believe that. I think the time to invest in your business is when your business is taking off, not when it's getting started. So these are real people using a skill that they already have, finding a way to transform or adapt that skill to this new economy that we're all finding ourselves in. So about 10 years ago, I published a book called The $100 Startup, which was kind of the story of accidental entrepreneurs, or again, just people across middle America, elsewhere, not always in tech centers, who had found a way, to follow their passion, follow their skill, usually together, follow a passion and a skill, and create something monetizable with it through the knowledge that they had, the expertise that they had, through something that they had learned, whether in education or in a job or just through a hobby. And I started telling these people stories because I felt like nobody really was. I felt like there were lots of stories about people like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk now, and very few stories about relatable people who, as I said, didn't have access, to a lot of capital or resources. And then 3 years ago, I started this project, a podcast called Side Hustle School, which I've been doing every day since January 1, 2017. And when I started, I was worried that I would run out of examples because, every day I'm telling a different story, answering listener questions. Again, just looking at somebody and saying here's the path that they followed, here's the idea that they had, here's what happened along the way. Well, I'm 1,200 episodes in and counting and not running out of stories at all. So before we go to a more interactive portion, or before I have a conversation with Chase, I thought I would just quickly tell you a few of these stories. One of the ones I really liked recently was a guy whose name was Dan, and he was a line cook in St. Louis, kind of working in the middle of the night, making pancakes and eggs for people who came in. And whenever the diner wasn't busy, he would, devote his time to making pancake art. And if he had a customer come in, he had a little bit more time, he would make their pancake, in the shape of some cartoon character or something fun. He just noticed that he got more tips, when he did that. And so he started getting really good at it. And a friend came along and said, hey, will you actually come to an event? I don't know if it was a birthday party or something else. Will you come to an event and do your art? And so he did. And from there, the two of them decided to actually make this a business. Well, about 3 years in, they were traveling all over the world. And like they were in Dubai last year, a bunch of other places. Obviously, they're not traveling as much now, but they built this business to multiple six figures. So this is a guy who is, again, a diner cook, in a random diner in Missouri, and now he and his partner are making six figures from a pretty basic skill, right? But a lot of people can make pancakes. He found a way to kind of level it up. So that's Dan Cakes. You can check him out online. Here's another image of one of their creations. It's really elaborate. This guy, Victor de la Flor, is a U.S. Marine who crushed his sunglasses like we have all done at different times, like end up sitting on them or something. And he did it one time too many, and he was like, I keep doing this. I buy nice sunglasses, and then I end up ruining them. And as a Marine, he had to wear a hat. And so he created this really, really simple product, very simple, like practical product that's providing a solution to a real problem, a 3D printed clip, to secure your sunglasses under a hat. He did so, just kind of bootstrapped, right? Just kind of DIY figuring it out. Well, when I featured him last, he had nearly matched his salary as a Marine with this side hustle, right? So he's still, in service, but he's also earning this extra income, which, as I said, is quite substantial. So he has options going forward. Maybe he'll go more into this, or maybe he'll just continue earning that extra money to prevent debt, to build security for his future. One more here. I told this story on my last book tour, but I like it so much I keep coming back to it. This woman in Washington, D.C., Danielle Fang, she was a volunteer going to in-person classes, teaching immigrants or tutoring immigrants who were studying to take the U.S. citizenship test. Now, this test is hard. If you are a U.S. citizen, if you were born in the States, you might have a hard time passing it. So you have to have a lot of specific knowledge. So people really have to study for it. And so one day she started uploading her tutorials to YouTube, and more people started watching. And then after she had enough of an audience, YouTube began putting some ads on those videos, and she gets a portion of that revenue. So anyway, now she has built this business. It's like a service, like she's helping people, but it's also for profit for her. When I last talked to her, she was making something like $4,000 to $5,000 a month from this, and hundreds of thousands of people are watching these tutorials. And I love this model because she is doing something that she used to do for free, like she was a volunteer. And now she's compensated for it. She's also reaching a lot more people than she ever would otherwise. And the people who are benefiting from this work she does don't pay anything for it because of the model of Google and YouTube, right? So lots of examples like this, lots of ways that people have found something that they know about or solved a common problem like the last guy mentioned. As I said, 1,200 episodes and counting. Keep finding stories. I keep finding more and more. I'm just going to give you a quick little overview here, a quick little rundown of a whole bunch of others. I'll go really quickly. And all of these are real businesses. So it's not like somebody has an idea. These are all profitable businesses that I've featured in just the past 3 months. Somebody was doing accent training. Somebody was doing custom confetti. Talked to a woman who was a belly dance instructor. And now she's doing online belly dancing tutorials and like belly dancing virtual bundles, actually doing pretty well with it. A guy who's made $250,000 doing drone repairs, which I think is really interesting because here's a statistic. Approximately 100% of drone owners will crash their drone. So it's a big market, fixing people's drones these days. I talked to a New Zealand teenager who was importing speed cubes, which are kind of like Rubik's cubes, but there's a whole like subculture hobby of this. So he started importing them from China and Australia. Now he's like the main guy in New Zealand selling these, earning a good income from it. A woman who's doing photography sessions focused on your Tinder profile, really specific market, but a lot of people who need to improve their dating profile photos. If you're not into that, there's another woman who is doing dog portraits. Right, so online dating portraits, dog portraits, again, profitable business. A guy whose passion, because everybody's got a thing, his passion was carnivorous plants, and was really into they got the Venus flytrap, but apparently there's a whole lot of others. Like the Venus flytrap is kind of a stereotype in the carnivorous plant world. So he decided to build the Wikipedia of these plants effectively, and created a little exchange where people can buy and sell and trade, and he earns a commission. On all these trades. So I like that example because it shows sometimes the more random or the more narrow the topic, the better. And I pull these examples out because people are always like, well, I don't know anything that other people would be interested in paying for. I'm like, oh, yes, you do. I'm sure you do, and I bet we can figure it out if we just talk it through. What else did I want to mention here? Let's see. Oh, rent the chicken. That's right. In case you have always wanted to bring a chicken into your home, but weren't sure if you're ready for a lifelong commitment, you can now foster a chicken through a for-profit service where somebody's actually doing pretty well for themselves. So you can check that out if you're interested. And these are not anomalies. You can see there's like so many different topics, so many different things that can be done. And one of my favorite things is to kind of talk with people who think that they don't have a marketable skill, and try to show them an example. And I like to teach through examples because it kind of destroys the excuses. It kind of is like, well, there's nothing I can do. Well, all these people were able to do it. Well, I don't have any money. Well, a lot of people don't have money, and they're able to do it. So let's find some relatable project, and let's see what you can do. I'm going to tell you one more. I really liked working on this story. I called it The Rise and Fall of birdsupplies.com, which you can go there if you want, but we might all crash the website if we visit at once. So the woman who's been running this site, she's actually had it for a long time. I forget how many years, more than 10 years, might be 15 years or more. And when she first started this site, she was the go-to spot, the source on the internet for, well, it's a spoiler, bird supplies. And she did really well with that for a while. But then I think she actually made like 6 figures from it. But then she became the victim of an algorithm change by Google, which is a whole other thing, a whole business lesson we could talk about there. The point is her income greatly dropped. And then she found a way to kind of reinvent herself. And she decided to focus specifically on parrots, not just all birds, but parrots. And apparently, parrots have a lot of behavioral issues. So she began writing ebooks, a series of ebooks specifically addressing parrot behavioral issues. These are all real products. Is your screaming parrot driving you nuts? A couple of examples here. Do parrots have emotions? This parrot is longing to go home to Canada, I believe. As she went along, she improved her design. So you got why parrots pluck their feathers. And then the perennial bestseller here, Why is My Parrot Biting Me? So all of these ebooks sell every day, hundreds of dollars in sales. It's about a 95% profit margin when you're selling something like this. So again, very hyper-specialized topic. And about that profit margin, by the way, in my great wisdom as a traditional author, I earn about 14% from my books. So she's doing, as I said, 90 to 95% profit margin. Kind of inspired me actually because in this time I have to also, be willing to change and adjust and adapt. And so I wanted to do something special here for CreativeLive. In addition to talking about the money tree, thought I would give you just a special sneak peek of my book that's coming out in the fall, Feather Plucking for Fun and Profit, Get Rich or Die Flying. So you can pre-order that at a certain point, but first focus on the money tree. So the whole point, this is possible. This is possible. There are a lot of people doing it. There's a way that you can do it too. There is something that you can do. If you've never thought of yourself as, being a business owner or entrepreneur, that's not what it's about. It's about creating freedom. It's about creating freedom for yourself, for your family perhaps, for your future. In this world of uncertainty, that's what it's all about. So here's one quick minute about the book, maybe 90 seconds, let's say, and then I'll have a conversation with Chase and then take whatever questions you have. My one request is, I'm trying to get this out to as many people as possible, both in terms of the book, just because it's a weird time to debut a book. 99% of the media attention in the world is focused on a single topic right now, so it's kind of hard to break through. I was supposed to do the 40-city tour. Now I'm not. I really want to reach people with the book, but more important is I hope the book is actually going to help people, and I want to help people in this situation of financial pressure. So a couple things we can do. I've got something coming out that's not ready just yet, but I will announce it here for the first time, more than just my new ebook. We're creating an online book registry, the world's first blockchain-enabled online book registry to allow people, two groups of people, to come to the site at moneytreebook.com. If you are experiencing any financial pressure, if you have lost your job, if you have significant debt, or you're just worried, because a lot of people are, then you can put your name down to receive a free copy of the book. And then anybody else who would like to be a donor, be a book donor, can come and purchase 1 copy, 5 copies, 10 copies, whatever, for any of those people. And you can purchase them for someone you know or for a stranger. And if people choose to opt in, then we're going to have a way to share their information, so you can actually get to know the person who you've given books to or have received a book from. There's post online with the hashtag moneytreebook.com. So as I said, that registry is not ready yet, but it will be shortly. And I will also be contributing to it, by the way. I will be contributing my author royalties, such as they are, for the first 3 months, everything that comes through this process to Teach for America and another organization that we haven't announced yet. But 100% of my profits will be going to that. And I'm also going to be investing in buying copies of my book for people who need them, which is kind of backwards now that I think about it. So I really should listen to my podcast at some point. But the point is, I really am invested with this book and this message, and I want to help people, navigate this time so that we can come out of it and be better than we were before. That we can come out of it saying like, wow, that time sucked in lots of ways, but yet it also kind of enabled me or nudged me or pushed me towards something that I wouldn't have discovered otherwise. That is my hope for so many people out there. I really believe, as I said, we're going to see lots of transformational shifts. So as I wrap up here, I wanted to share something with you. This is the last thing. Like if you only remember one thing from our time together, I thought about asking, to pop your answer to this in the chat. And if you have your answer already, you can do that. But this is like a more complicated question than like, what did you eat for breakfast today? So I totally understand if you don't have an immediate answer to this question and you want to think about it for a while. The question is, what is your life motto in 4 words? And the reason I bring this up is because I realized recently what mine was, which I'll share with you here. And when I kind of encapsulated it, I was like, oh yeah, this is how I've been living my life this is how I've been living my whole life, but I never had a way to just codify it like this. And so my answer, what I wanted to share with you is, like, whatever you're going through, whatever you're experiencing, whatever path you're on, whatever you're trying to figure out, my 4-word, life motto is, there is another way. There is a conventional path. There is the path that you know about. There is, the path and the options that people have presented to you or shared with you. There, are all the things that you were supposed to do or expected to do or assumed to do. And all those things are fine. It's not like, as I said, they're all a liar, they're all wrong or bad. I just want you to know that there is another way. There really is. And when we're in this time now, this time of uncertainty, anxiety, there is another way. There is a way through, right? If you are experiencing that pressure, if you are like, man, I don't know what to do next, short term, long term, like I don't have every single answer for you. Part of the value of self-reliance is like, let's all figure it out together. But there really is another way. So I hope, as I said at the beginning, that we can all come through this, look back and say, all right, I'm better now than I was before. And I want to do everything I can to support people in that. So this slide says thank you, which I think reminds me that I should say thank you to Chase, thank you to the CreativeLive team, and thank you to everybody out there who is watching from wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
There's like a standing ovation here in this, this room. I'm just imagining it.
Amazing, man. Thank you so much for that. And as you were thanking people, we literally have people from all over the world. We've got people from Scandinavia, people from South Africa. I see some Europe. We've got the full gamut here. So
Awesome.
Thank you so much for reaching such a diverse and inclusive audience. We've been friends for a long time. And one of the questions I'm seeing in the chat, and one of the questions that I had, if you remember, we sat down over an Italian meal the last time you were in Seattle, when we could actually be within 6 feet of each other,
right.
And breaking bread. And we were talking about the money tree. And one of the questions that I have that I know is true for others is, this is a fiction book that you've written here, right, and you've embedded these lessons in a story. So what made you take that route, and how much fun or extra hard work was it? Two-part question.
It was extra fun and extra hard work. It was both. I got the idea at some point. I don't remember exactly what the origin was, but I started thinking about a story, right? And it is a story. I'm trying to teach through storytelling. My hope is that people will read this book who might not read, a how-to book or a business book, but who need this information, right? It's not just information, right? They need a path. They need they need to believe in themselves, and they need to understand that this world is accessible to them, because they've never thought of themselves, as going down that entrepreneurial path. And so often stories are far more effective, than a how-to book. And they're often more memorable. Like you can remember a lot of stories more easily than you can remember like a 6-step, checklist. And so I started thinking about that main character, Jake, and I spent maybe 3 months just kind of outlining some ideas before I wrote anything, outlining ideas, thinking through characters, thinking through plot, and just really trying to hone it and make it really sharp. And then I wrote the whole book before I ever showed my agent or my editor, which normally in nonfiction publishing, you write a little proposal, like here's what the book's going to be about, and you go away and actually write the book. So I did it the other way around. I wanted to actually, first prove to myself that I could do this, write something that I felt that was high quality. And then just then kind of say, okay, here it is. Like, what do you guys think? And I was very happy that that people really believed in it at the publishing side. But yes, it was a lot of fun because I hadn't done it before, and it was also a lot of work. I think I wrote maybe 7 or 8 drafts of this book, and normally I'll write about 3 drafts, maybe 4 drafts. So I put a lot into it. So I think there are lessons. I think you can read it and be entertained and be inspired, but hopefully you'll also kind of go away with a sense of here's what I can do next in my life.
Well, I found it incredibly inspirational. Someone who's written a book and knows how hard it is, right. And finished this book. The storytelling was amazing. But there's a little meta lesson that I found in there, which is you took a risk in putting this out there in a new format, new to you, and that is so much about what you speak about, what you write about, is people taking risks to tap into whatever it is their passion. It's just getting started doing something instead of nothing. That's a huge theme in the book. So is this a process of taking your own medicine?
Absolutely. I mean, it is a bit of a risk creatively, and in the publishing world, just like any industry, it's like once you get on a certain track, that's the track you're supposed to stay on, and you can achieve a certain amount of success as long as you're on that track. But there's no guarantee if you jump tracks, you're going to be successful. But, for me, it's not about success, quote unquote success. It's about, meaning and purpose, doing something that I believe in, creative work. Obviously anybody watching CreativeLive believes in that value. And I just feel it's needed, and so I hope the book sells well. Like I want my books to do well, but ultimately I want it to reach, the right people. So whether it's a risk or not, it's something that I'm very happy to do.
So let's talk about the third way. And you recounted in your prezo, ways 1 and 2. Do you feel like the third way is it the future? Is it, just by the title itself, like the third way, it means it's another way.
Right.
But is that more what the future is going to look like? I mean, let's just to be super blunt.
Sure.
We're entering a time where we can't go back to a lot of things the way they used to be. Some form of sort of normalcy will return, but we've shifted gears and we're onto a completely different universe. So is the third way a growing part of the future, or because we've been hit with this pandemic is going to scare people away?
Yeah, I'm glad you said what you just mentioned about how we're not going to go back, to the way things were. I think that's really important to stress. And a lot of industries are not going to be the same. A lot of jobs are not going to be the same. And so, if you're in a situation like that, I think, the wrong thing to do, if you're in an industry that has taken a market decline, the wrong thing to do is to just kind of wait it out, right? The wrong thing to do is like fight reality and wait it out. I talked to somebody the other day who is a flight attendant, and he asked me, he's like, when do you think travel is going to pick up again? And I'm like, just to be honest with you, I think it's going to be a long time. I think it's going to be a very long time. I think it's not going to be the same. And if anybody tells you that, it's going to be okay and what you should be doing right now is putting your flight attendant resume on LinkedIn and contacting other airlines, I think they're just trying to make you feel better. Yeah. So you need to understand, like, it's going to be different, as you said, Chase. And then, as for the third way, well, I think it's both the present and the future, and in some ways it's the past. Like, I like to always be clear when I talk about this kind of stuff. We often present entrepreneurial models from a very Western perspective, and I've spent a lot of time traveling the world, going to some really poor countries. Lived in a number of poor countries before, in Liberia and Sierra Leone, on a hospital ship in West Africa, and in those countries, the majority of countries in the world, in fact, if you kind of go out of the city and you go into the village, everybody has a micro entrepreneurial project. Every person there is side hustling and buying and selling and trading, and this kind of commerce has existed since commerce has existed since the beginning of time, or since people were buying and selling. So the reason I say that is because this has been happening a long time in lots of different parts of the world. What's different now is access to networks, connectivity, globalization, e-commerce becoming mainstream. Just the idea of people being able to do this, is now mainstream, which is good. Like the joke I tell, which is true. My parents are probably watching. Hey, Mom, 20 years ago when I was working for myself, as I've always worked for myself, I was 19 and starting to sell things online with eBay. I didn't know anybody else who was doing this. I couldn't go to a coffee shop and see somebody else, there working on their consulting business. And so I think my parents were kind of worried about me. I think they were kind of like, we know Chris is doing something on the internet, but we hope it's not bad. We hope it's not drugs or porn, And I was like, there's more than two industries, on the internet, just so you know. But now nobody thinks that way, because in every coffee shop, or, if you can't go to coffee shop now, everywhere people are starting their own little website. They've got their stuff, so that's what's different. And is it the future where more people create their own dependence and security and, can point to an external source of income like the U.S. Marine that I mentioned? It's not like he doesn't have a fulfilling job. He's doing this in addition to that. I hope that more people, will do that, because it just makes their life better.
Amazing. So I finished the book this morning. And I specifically saved the last 40 pages for, I was fortunate enough to get an advance copy. Thank you so much for getting me one of those. And just so it was extra fresh for me. And I couldn't help but go back, and I've got a lot of dog-eared pages here. But one of the things that, I happen to know you personally and have for a decade or so, and that's I'm grateful for that. But I also saw things that I was weaving in my mind, there's an autobiographical sensibility here, and I don't think that it's certainly not a one-to-one. But how much of the book did you feel like you layered in there intentionally? And I'm guessing, as your friend, that there's some stuff that maybe it was unintentional, but of course I'm just presuming. So just talk about the how personal some of the writing was for you.
I mean, it was very personal because of the nature of it being fiction. It's not that I said that the main character, Jake, or any other character, is based on me. I think I can see parts of myself in all the characters. I mean, there's a character who's not very nice as well, and I can see parts of myself in that guy. To be honest, right? To be fair, so it's not meant to be autobiographical in that sense, but. One of the things that Jake has to do in the beginning is his mentor Clarence challenges him to make $1,000 in the next week. And at first, Jake is like, well, how do I do that? If I knew how to make $1,000, I wouldn't be in this position. But basically, Clarence says, figure it out. And so Jake starts selling his textbooks, his old college economics textbooks, on an online auction site. And that's what I did 20 years ago, essentially. And then he realizes from there he can see what the other auctions are, selling for, and then buying and selling, arbitrage, et cetera. So I have some experiences like that. And then the middle portion of the book takes place in Ethiopia, which the continent of Africa is very close and personal to me. And so Ethiopia is different from West Africa, but still some of that is there. That said, one of the things I've been hearing from some of the advanced readers, like some of the people who are on Side Hustle School, we sent them a copy of the book. They're saying that even if they are not like the main character, they're a different kind of person demographically, they can see themselves in that person. So a friend of mine, Shannon Mattern from Ohio, I think she said she's 41, 42. She's like, I'm a 41-year-old woman, and I connect very, very much, to Jake, the 28-year-old guy, because I was in a similar situation, and I was in a corporate environment like his, and I had to find my way out, and nobody was telling me what to do, but I eventually figured it out. So my hope is that it's relatable to really anybody who's experiencing some kind of struggle.
Oh, it's incredibly relatable as someone who's struggling to adapt to a changing world. We at CreativeLive, we stood up CreativeLive TV in just a week and are broadcasting live from the homes all over the place. Me personally, my wife Kate, who you know well, finally I got kicked off the living room table or the dining room table down into a spare bedroom downstairs. So there's a lot of change, and I think we're all trying to find a new normal. with respect, I want to go back to this, your writing of the book, because I think that process you talked about briefly, you put a lot of extra juice into this one, 8 revisions or something like that. I think that there's a lot to understand about anything when you uncover the process. So did the fact that you rewrote this 8 times instead of the 3 or 4 that you normally would in a nonfiction book, was that a signal of the amount of insight that you were trying to put in the book? Was it a factor of just being new and different? What was that extra work that you put in? I know when we're trying to learn new things, which is so much about, there's a big part of your book, Jake's trying to learn a new skill. And again, I like this meta narrative of, is this you learning a new skill, and are we going to see more fiction from you in the future?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the last thing. I really, really enjoyed it. I really liked it. So we'll see what happens next. But as for that work process, I think it's probably a combination of all those things you mentioned. I did get some really good input about it. I mean, definitely my agent and editor really kind of contributed some really sharp comments on the final drafts that I think made it a better process. So do want to acknowledge that. But I think what's interesting thing with fiction, just like a lot of other creative work, is there's lots of different ways you can do it. It's not like there's a one right way. You don't come to this is the 100% optimal path. So I think for me, it was just what is the best way? What is the best way for me to tell this story and to be proud of it, and to feel like I've found the right balance of entertainment and inspiration, where people could read it and just enjoy the story, while also learning something. Here's something I didn't want to do. I'll tell you this about process. I didn't want to include at the end of each chapter, hey, here's what you should have learned during this chapter, which is a common thing in books, the 3 bullet points at the end, which I always find kind of annoying, I think I've done it before. But just to be transparent, it's you read the chapter and it's hey, here are the 3 things you should have learned in the chapter. Did you really learn them? Just want to make sure. Did you learn? Here it is again. So I don't have anything like that at all. It's meant to just be let's enjoy this experience. Let's immerse ourselves in this experience. But hopefully come away at the end being okay, now what am I going to do with my life next?
Amazing. If you're just joining us, or if you're watching on a different platform, as we're streaming this, not just here at CreativeLive, but we're pushing this to our social channels, some of Chris's. Welcome, first of all, and I'm Chase Jarvis, the founder and CEO of CreativeLive, and have the very good fortune of talking to my dear friend Chris Guillebeau about his new book, The Money Tree. And anyone in the world, wherever you're hearing this right now, seeing it, whatever, you can pop over to creativelive.com/Chris. And that will allow you to view the page in CreativeLive, which will also allow you to join the chat here. And all you have to do is up in the upper right-hand corner, click Join Chat, and that will allow you to ask questions for the question and answer section, which is coming shortly here in the next, 20 minutes or so. I've already got a long queue of questions, but if you put your questions in there, we're monitoring them. I'm monitoring them, and we'll be happy to consider them. Okay, so away from process now, and a little bit more towards some of the lessons in the book. What I observed is that you pulled so many different aspects of your previous, I don't know how many, 6 books, 5-6 books now, and this overlap. I want to go back to, I think it was in Born for this overlapping Venn diagram of, I think you called it money, flow, and
joy.
Yeah. This area, these different pieces of our individual personalities, where we can find the thing that we're supposed to do. For those people, like Jake, who are comfortable in their job and want to have a side hustle. Can you walk us through that? That's still the most profound way for that I know of. I've adopted it. I always credit you, but just so you know. But just for the people right now who are saying, "Oh, cool! I'm bought into this idea. I want to have a side hustle. I just don't know how or where to look." So, Can you coach us on that?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. I mean, it's. I appreciate you saying you've bought into it, but I actually think you were one of the inspirations for it when I was thinking about what is this trifecta and who is living it out. So the trifecta is as you said, joy, money, and flow, and these are the 3 elements that I think contribute to to meaning and purpose, and some amount of happiness, but that's a different topic. So meaning and purpose, joy is like you're doing something that you love to do. You like doing something. It's not that you're passionate about 100% of aspects of everything that you do, your job and stuff, but overall it's like this is what you like. And money is this element of being sustainable, right? You're doing something that actually compensates you, because in the world that we live, we need money to exchange for other stuff. And then flow is this skill that you have that is just so sharp, and something that you're really good at, maybe something that is easy to you, but other people find it difficult, something that you can just really immerse yourself in, and like, this is the work that I love to do. And I think when you find that, like, that is the goal. Like, we're all on this like journey to find it, and maybe you never reach it, right? But you're always trying to get closer and closer to the intersection between these three things. And in life, you can sometimes be satisfied with only two of them. And there can be some times that you go through a season where you're like, man, I actually need to really make some money right now. I don't care what it is. I don't have to be good at it. I don't have to love it. And then other times, it might be one of the others, but ultimately what we want is all three of those things. So as it pertains to what is my side hustle, what is it that I'm going to choose, there's a number of exercises we can go through about identifying your skills and such, and what are the skills you have that are marketable, how are you going to transform those skills into a product or a service that we offer to people. But that's also about an intersection of, I really like to do this thing and it is valuable. It's not just both. It's not just one. It's like, I really like to do this thing and other people also find it marketable and valuable. I'm not just like doing something for myself. I'm doing something that is contributing in a way. And usually you can talk that through with people and help them kind of understand what the intersection is.
Amazing. I feel like I point to that book and to you, maybe not daily, but certainly weekly. It's just a really elegant answer to the question. There's this a theme in the book. I'm just going to grab one particular page here. Check how you say it. It's just being, I'm going to put it in slightly different words because you use it really eloquently in the book, but just you're more capable than you give yourself credit for. And it's a very powerful theme of the book. I see it in your work. The World Domination Summit to me is one of the most profound events that I've ever attended. This is where you bring thousands of people together to set world records and to just observe when some committed, hardworking people come together, what's possible. So for the folks at home, things like imposter syndrome, if you've arrived, self-doubt, just negative self-talk. I think I want to know, and I think it's a popular question. It's something that's getting talked about in the chat room right now. How do you have a prescription for overcoming that? How do you remedy it yourself? Talk to us about how you think about it.
I don't have a prescription or a remedy. It's something that coexists, for me, and I think for a lot of other creatives. It's not about like pushing through it or pretending that it's not there. It's more like, what is the higher value? So yes, I experience doubt and negative self-worth all the time. I've gone through a lot of stuff. I've talked about that a little bit. Just even like mental health issues and depression and anxiety. And I think people need to talk about that stuff more. So those things can be there, and at the same time, you have a desire to do something more. You have this aspiration. You have a feeling within yourself that you are meant for more, right? Like there is more to life than this, whatever this is that's around you. And so in the book, that theme that you mentioned, like the way I explain it in the book is you can do more than you think. And it's just a kind of recurring, mantra, recurring like slogan that's kind of presented. And that's certainly been the case in my life. Like I never thought that I would go to every country in the world. I never thought that I'd be speaking to like all these people around the world. Not at all. I just did one thing. I did the thing that was in front of me. I think this is always good advice. Like do the thing that's in front of you right now. If you have one small idea, don't worry about don't criticize this idea or analyze it to death. Just do that thing. And if that leads you to something else, then do the next thing. And that's what I did with everything in terms of starting the blog 11 years ago. I said, I want to one day have 1,000 people that read my blog. That was what I wrote in the very first post of chrisguillebeau.com. And I said, maybe one day I want to write a book, right? Like one book, And so now here we are. Now we got the summit, all the other stuff. And it's because I did the thing that was in front of me and kept doing that over and over and over. The last thing I want to say about imposter syndrome is for that person out there who has that dream, that aspiration, that inkling, that sense. Maybe you don't even know what it is. It's just a sense. It's just a sense, like there's something more for me. I think if you don't pursue that thing, that's when you are being an imposter, because the real you, the authentic you, that's where that authenticity is in pursuing that idea, even if you don't know where it leads. And if you choose to turn your back on that, then you are rejecting a big part of yourself. And you don't want to do that. So it's actually the true self that is, leading you towards saying yes, and it's the imposter that holds you back.